Hi, this is Professor Jeffries at Seattle Central College, and this is Psychology African Americans, and I'm starting out with week 3. This is the beginning of week 3 in Psychology African Americans. Last couple of weeks, we talked a lot about how the church and scientific community collaborated to make black people look inferior. And the thing is, it wasn't just black people look inferior to Europeans, it made black people look inferior to the whole world, even to the point to where black folks internalize those negative images about themselves. Okay, and we'll look at the strength of global propaganda. The propaganda that Europeans are the highest up there, and then Africans at the lowest. I mean, genetically. And then the church came in and said, well, these people don't have a soul, so it's okay for them to be slaves. And even the scarier part of that is that blacks internalize those views of themselves. The black doll versus the white doll, Kenneth Clark study, where a lot of black kids chose the white doll to play with over the black doll, even though they were black, where most white kids chose the white doll because it looked like them. One of the things this study doesn't really look at is that there's a large percentage of the children, black children, who chose the black doll over the white doll. Something like 35% in Banks's, right around a third of them Banks's, and some even higher than that. Some other studies that showed that a lot of black kids in those studies actually chose the black doll. I'd rather see studies looking at why those kids were choosing the black doll, appropriate doll, as opposed to always looking at what's wrong with these black kids who chose the white doll over the black doll. But think about in terms of propaganda, Western propaganda, world civilization, Western civilization, world history is mainly taught from a European's perspective. And always whenever you get world history, when anything African or black is mentioned, it's always something negative. Okay, so now you know. After this first 2 weeks, now you know basically what everything's about as far as what's going on. Now we're going to go a little bit deeper. We're going to get a little deeper now. Okay, think about power. Now you know you're thinking about power. You can go to the library and look up the definition of power. Okay, and now we can look at what 1490 actually represents. 1492 over the ocean blue, or 1490 is when Isabella and Ferdinand married, which pushed all the African/Moors out of Spain. So we're looking at 1490s marked the rise of European power, the European empire, and the fall of the African empire. Okay, and the video Othello, which will be one of the first videos you see on this, will kind of explain. But Othello is an African, okay, and we'll look at it in detail. Then we're going to go down and start looking at some other videos. Okay, because what we're really talking about is psychological warfare. A war, mental war, menticide, as some people used to say back in the 80s. Okay, destroying a person's mind. Okay, beat down, you're nothing but an African, you never be anything better. And then the child believes that, internalizes that racism. I don't like myself, so oftentimes they lash out at others. They look like self-hatred express outward. Okay, same issue. Okay, think about this. So next few videos, a line of videos, are going to be basically looking at deconstructing racism from another aspect. One of Frances Welsing's one of the speakers that you're going to see, and she's one of the first psychiatrists who basically took Freud's theory and used it to explain why white people are racist. I think you'll find that video really interesting. If you ever had a chance to read her books, Frances Welsing her crest theory. Okay, we'll also look at why Europeans erased our history and made us look like Africans to the point to where we don't like each other or even like ourselves. Okay, then we'll also look at some areas in terms of self-esteem versus self-group esteem. A person can feel good about himself or herself, but still think badly of their group. You see a lot of African Americans like that, where I like myself, but I don't really particularly care for my people. Okay, matter of fact, they're embarrassing to me. And then Michelle Alexander, she's the one who wrote the book, The New Jim Crow. She'll be talking about explaining the situation in terms of think about psychological warfare, exercise of power, but using power to freeze people out of the job market. One of the things Michelle Alexander is saying, or Dr. Alexander is saying, is that if you freeze the people out of the job market, that's what sets them up to be violent. I would say watch it. That's a really long video, but it's very important. So I say watch it maybe 5-10 minute intervals. Watch a little bit, turn it off, kind of take notes, think about it, and come back later. Don't try to watch it all the way through, especially any of these videos actually longer than 30-35 minutes. Don't try to watch them all the way through. Kind of watch them a little bit. Take your time. Watch them, digest it, come back and watch some more. What Michelle Alexander talks about is really important. She also talks about William Julius Wilson. William Julius Wilson, he's first book he wrote was talking about the declining significance of race. What he was really talking about was the 1980s represented a shift in the job market, a shift from a factory worker, steel mill oriented society to a service oriented society. And as a result, those steel worker jobs left, and you see examples of Flint, Michigan, all throughout the Midwest, where unemployment all of a sudden went up. Okay, the Reagan years, people oftentimes nickname, and that's what Reagan was trying to come about, bringing back those industrial jobs in Ohio and other parts, and the Rust Belt. That's what they voted, hoping those jobs come back. But William Julius Wilson is a shift in the job market. Okay, it caused that. But anyway, but a lot of videos you'll be looking at is talking to Francis Wilson, talking about why white cops don't go to jail. We'll also look at implicit bias. Implicit bias. This is where really most white folks or European people they don't see themselves as racist. But then little things come up. They did a study a few years ago where they showed pictures of people's faces. Instead of a person in dark people's faces, or now if it's a black male or Latino male, oftentimes people had the same physiological response as they would toward snakes and spiders. Okay, but if you ask that person, are they racist? They'll say no. Okay, so they implicit bias, being racist but not really seeing themselves as racist. Okay, we'll look at that, and we'll also look at the history of white supremacy as it came along. Then we looked at some myths of racism, and also we'll look at white's response as to racism. Anything I think you'll find this week really interesting.